Elena Rice felt the weight of 8 billion humans on her shoulders as the crystalline chamber fell into deafening silence. The Galactic Council's amphitheater, designed to accommodate over 300 distinct species, seemed to contract around her, the soaring architecture suddenly claustrophobic. Ambassador Rias, High Counselor Thaxmore's voice resonated without requiring amplification, his crystalline form refracting light in hypnotic patterns. The Council has reached its decision. Elena straightened her spine, years of diplomatic training barely masking her trembling hands. Humanity's 5-year application process, the technological demonstrations, the cultural exchanges, the painstaking negotiations, all came down to this moment. The petition for humanity's admission to the Galactic Council is denied. Thaxmore announced, compound eyes betraying no emotion. The vote is unanimous. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Not a single dissenting voice. Not even from the Altarians who had seemed so supportive during private meetings. Furthermore, Thaxmore continued before Elena could process the rejection. Humanity is hereby designated a Class 4 quarantine species, effective immediately. Elena's translator implant sputtered, the classification unfamiliar. I don't understand. What is a Class 4? A species deemed fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization, interrupted Counselor Jetlak, her gelatinous form pulsing with what Elena had learned to recognize as agitation. Your kind exhibits dangerous evolutionary characteristics, accelerated adaptation rates, unpredictable innovative capacity, and pack bonding with unrelated species. Those are our strengths, Elena protested, her voice echoing in the chamber. We came seeking friendship, cultural exchange. You came seeking technologies you have not earned, rumbled a massive Dorvac representative, skin plates shifting like tectonic movements. Your species leaped from atmospheric flight to rudimentary space travel in less than a century. Our predictive models show you would reach weapons parity with Council founders within 3 generations. That's not our intention. Her microphone deactivated with a chirp. Thaxmore raised a crystalline appendage. The decision is final. A quarantine barrier will be established around your solar system. No technological exchange, no cultural contamination, no further appeals. This session is concluded. The representatives began filing out through species-specific exits. Only Laxvia, a junior Tolari delegate, met Elena's gaze briefly, her iridescent eyes communicating something unreadable before she too departed. 12 hours later, Elena's shuttle approached Earth, its viewports revealing the new reality. Massive Council enforcement vessels hovered at strategic Lagrange points, their hulls emblazoned with unfamiliar glyphs. Smaller patrol craft established a web of monitoring stations stretching beyond Neptune's orbit. Her secure comm pinged with an incoming transmission from the United Nations Secretary-General. It's worse than we feared, Elena reported, her voice hollow. Total isolation. They're calling us unpredictable, violent, a contamination risk. The Security Council is in emergency session, he replied, strain evident in his voice. We're getting reports of mass panic, religious upheaval. Half the world is glued to telescopes watching alien ships deploy around our planet. What are our options? Diplomatically, none. They've made that clear. Militarily, a bitter laugh. Their smallest vessel could likely sterilize a continent. The transmission briefly dissolved into static as the shuttle passed through the newly established barrier. A taste of their coming isolation. There's something else, Elena said quietly. I don't think they're telling the truth about why we're being excluded. The Dorvac mentioned predictive models showing our development curve. They're not afraid we're too violent. They're afraid we're too *adaptable*. Report to the Himalayan facility upon landing. The Secretary-General instructed, his tone shifting. Dr. Chen has been lobbying for a meeting with you. Says he has contingencies specifically for this scenario. What kind of contingencies could possibly help us now? The kind we don't discuss on any channel, Ambassador. the kind that assumes the worst about our new neighbors. As the shuttle began its descent, Alina watched city lights come into view. 8 billion humans, suddenly alone yet not alone in the universe, cut off from the stars just as they learned how populated they truly were. The truth hit her with terrible clarity. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if we were alone in the universe, only to discover we weren't welcome in it. 5 years to the day after the quarantine began, Captain Sophia Okafor stood in the gleaming command center of the Pathfinder, breathing recycled air that smelled faintly of ozone and new electronics. Through the forward viewport, Antarctica's research station Alpha stretched across the icy landscape, its true purpose hidden beneath. Humanity's first off-grid shipyard. Final systems check complete, announced Dr. Eliza Cupper, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Metamaterial hull integrity at 98.7%. Sophia nodded, studying the diverse bridge crew. Specialists selected not just for their expertise, but for their ability to think beyond established paradigms. A geneticist who had pioneered bacterial computing. A lunar miner who had created microgravity construction techniques. A former child chess prodigy turned quantum physicist. The Council believes we're still licking our wounds and adjusting to isolation, Sophia reminded them, her voice steady despite the historic weight of the moment. That misconception is our greatest advantage. Lieutenant Raj Patel looked up from his station. Captain, something you should see. He projected intercepted Council communications, translated into simplified English. They've established a predictable patrol pattern. 17-hour cycles with consistent 6-minute gaps at these coordinates. They're efficient but not creative, Sophia observed. Schedule-bound. Exactly, Patel agreed. They can't imagine anyone would attempt a breakout, so they're not looking for one. Typical authoritarian mindset, added Dr. Chen's voice as he entered the bridge. 5 years had etched deeper lines around his eyes, his hair now steel gray. They believe their technological superiority makes them invulnerable. Sophia checked the mission clock. Commence launch sequence. All personnel, prepare for stealth procedures. The Pathfinder rose silently from its underground hangar, its revolutionary hull-absorbing radar, LIDAR, and all known Council detection frequencies. As the ship climbed through the upper atmosphere, emergency protocols activated worldwide to create digital noise, satellite maintenance, weather balloon launches, even coordinated social media campaigns about meteor showers. Anything to distract Council monitors. At 400 kilometers, they passed the first automated sensor net. The bridge crew held their breath as proximity alarms silently flashed. A Council patrol vessel loomed above them, massive and arrogant in its dominance, unaware of the human achievements slipping past beneath it. Hull temperature rising, whispered Dr. Cupper. Stealth system load at 83%. Sophia kept her eyes fixed on the patrol ship. Maintain course. Minimal adjustments only. For 17 agonizing minutes, the Pathfinder drifted through the Council's security web, each layer more sophisticated than the last. When they finally passed the outermost boundary, Patel's console illuminated. We're clear, Captain. We've officially broken quarantine. No one cheered. They weren't out of danger yet, but Sophia saw the pride in their eyes. Humanity's first act of defiance had succeeded. Set course for Kuiper Belt Station Omega, she ordered, and prepare long-range scanners. Let's see what else our custodians have been hiding from us. 3 weeks later, on the edge of the solar system, the Pathfinder approached a hollowed-out asteroid that would serve as their forward base. As engineering teams began installation of life support systems, the ship's sensors detected an anomalous energy signature from a nearby object. Council technology, Sophia asked, studying the readouts. Negative, Patel replied. Signature doesn't match any Council profiles in our database. He recalibrated the scanners. It appears to be a distress beacon, but using frequencies outside Council standard spectrum. Dr. Chen's expression tightened. Someone else is hiding from them. against standard protocol, but following instinct refined through years of special operations, Sophia made her decision. Alter course to investigate. Maintain stealth configuration. The object resolved into view, a damaged vessel of unfamiliar design, its hull punctured by what appeared to be weapon impacts. No life signs registered, but its systems continued to broadcast the mysterious signal. Prepare a boarding team, Sophia ordered. Full containment protocols. Hours later, Lieutenant Patel returned from the derelict ship, his face ashen as he placed a strange crystalline data storage device on the bridge console. "Captain, you need to see this," he said quietly. "We weren't the first to be excluded by the Council, and some of the others have been fighting back for centuries." The nebula swirled in violent hues of crimson and gold, ionized gas-forming patterns that resembled Earth's aurora borealis magnified 1,000-fold. Captain Okafor stood transfixed by the viewport as the Pathfinder navigated the treacherous stellar nursery, following coordinates extracted from the derelict ship's data core. Radiation levels make this region impenetrable to standard Council sensors, Lieutenant Winters explained, her eyes never leaving her security station. Perfect hiding place, if you can survive it. Detecting artificial structures at bearing 037, announced the sensor officer. Unusual configuration. Appears to be harvesting plasma from solar prominences. The structures materialized through the colorful haze. Dozens of spindly collection vessels surrounding a young star, each trailing tendrils of luminescent material into storage chambers. Their design defied conventional engineering, more reminiscent of organic forms than manufactured technology. "Life signs?" Sophia asked. "Indeterminate," came the reply. "Either shielded or fundamentally different from biological patterns we recognize." Before further analysis could be completed, the star at the nebula's center convulsed. A massive prominence, far larger than the collectors were designed to handle, erupted toward the fragile-looking fleet. "They'll be incinerated," Winters said quietly. Sophia's decision came instantly. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Inform them we're moving to assist." She turned to Dr. Kapper. "Can we extend our shields?" "Theoretically," the engineer replied, already reconfiguring systems. "But we'd be revealing our presence and technology level to unknown entities. Saving lives takes priority over secrecy," Sophia stated. "Execute emergency protocols." The Pathfinder surged forward, positioning itself between the solar flare and the collector vessels. Shield emitters strained beyond safety parameters as they projected a protective barrier large enough to cover the alien fleet. On the engineering deck, coolant systems ruptured under the strain, flooding compartments with scalding vapor. 2 crew members would later succumb to their injuries, but the gambit worked. As the prominence subsided, the collector vessels reoriented themselves toward the human ship. A transmission arrived, not in sound or visual format, but as a complex pattern of energy pulses directly interfacing with the ship's computer system. Dr. Kepper's translation algorithms struggled to interpret the alien communication method. "It's not language as we understand it," she explained. "More like shared consciousness imprinting." When the translation finally resolved, multiple voices spoke simultaneously through the ship's speakers. "The Council told us humans only destroy. Yet you sacrifice for strangers." The Vextal colony ship dwarfed the Pathfinder as they docked in a crystalline bay. Ambassador protocols had never contemplated this scenario. First contact with a species deliberately hidden from humanity by the Council. The reception committee defied easy description. Each Vextal individual comprised thousands of coral-like polyps arranged in roughly humanoid configurations, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that served as their primary communication method. They existed as a collective consciousness, distributed across multiple bodies. "We were architects of Council space stations for 12,000 years, the colony's elder node explained, its light patterns translated through newly calibrated algorithms. Our bodies build organically, creating structures that self-repair and evolve with use." "What happened?" Sophia asked. "Progress," came the bitter reply. Automated construction drones proved more efficient. Our biological capabilities became obsolete. The elder node guided them to a vast chamber that left the human contingent speechless. Artifacts from dozens of species filled the space. Artworks, technologies, and cultural records preserved in environmentally controlled displays. The Council's greatest deception is not who they exclude, the Vextall explained, but how they erase all evidence of that exclusion. Lieutenant Winters approached a section containing what appeared to be historical archives. "What is this?" "The Hall of Lost Memory," answered the elder. Records of civilizations deemed disruptive influences and removed from official galactic history, some rejected for biological incompatibility, others for cultural practices, many simply for asking too many questions. Winter's hand hovered over a data terminal. "May I?" Given permission, she interfaced her specialized decryption tools with the alien technology. Her expression hardened as information flooded her screen. "Captain," she said, voice tight with controlled anger, "I found humanity's file. It was created over 200 years ago, long before our first spaceflight. That's impossible. The Council has been monitoring Earth since our Industrial Revolution." Winters displayed the evidence. "We were pre-classified for exclusion based on predictive algorithms. They were never going to accept us." "Why?" demanded Dr. Kepper. It was the Vextall elder who answered, light patterns pulsing in what they would later learn indicated profound sadness. "The founding species fear what they call evolutionary wildcards, species that adapt too quickly, think too differently. Their perfect order cannot accommodate true diversity." Sophia stared at the gallery of the forgotten, a cold certainty forming in her mind. "Then we'll build something better," she said quietly. "Not just for humanity, but for everyone they cast aside." 10 years after Earth's quarantine, the jungle moon of Talax V pulsed with life that should have made human settlement impossible. Vegetation grew at visible rates, vines creeping across cleared paths within hours, spores capable of infiltrating most filtration systems. Yet surrounded by this botanical onslaught stood Haven Outpost, its buildings seamlessly integrated with the environment rather than fighting against it. Dr. Imani Okello adjusted her environmental suit as she stepped from the research facility into the controlled agricultural zone. Nearby, insectoid Krev workers, each standing nearly 7 feet tall with iridescent exoskeletons, calculated growth algorithms with mathematical precision that complemented the human scientists' experimental approach. "The latest hybrid strain is exceeding expectations," said Krebtak, the colony's co-administrator, mandibles clicking gently. Nutrient uptake increased by 43%, while toxic compound sequestration has stabilized. "We'll need to accelerate production," Imani replied, reviewing data on her tablet. "The Council's supply embargo on Keldar Prime enters its 3rd month next week." Krevtak's antennae quivered, their species equivalent of a nod. "My broodkin will prepare additional shipments disguised as routine merchant traffic." This was the Crossroads network in operation, dozens of shadow colonies turning the Council's blind spots into lifelines for suffering worlds. What began as humanity's desperate bid for survival had evolved into something revolutionary, a cooperative shadow economy where each species contributed unique capabilities Council bureaucracy had devalued. Imani's comm unit chimed with an incoming transmission routed through 6 different relay points to avoid detection. Admiral Okuffer's face appeared, the connection choppy but secure. "Quantum comm testing begins in 36 hours, the Admiral reported. "If successful, we can finally coordinate in real time across all settlements." "The Council still believes instantaneous communication is energetically impossible," Imani replied. "Their entire communication network relies on light speed limitations to maintain control." Speaking of control, we have a situation developing in the Arcturus sector. A Council science vessel detected energy anomalies near the Joint Human-Lithian outpost. "They're sending investigators." Imani's expression tightened. "The settlement houses over 200 children in the education center. That's the problem. Our intelligence suggests the science vessel already transmitted preliminary findings mentioning biological cross-contamination between species. The unspoken implications hung heavily between them. The Council's containment protocols for contaminated settlements were notorious among the discarded sterilization procedures that left no survivors. How long do we have? 28 hours at most. I'm redirecting the Defiance and Harbinger to evacuate, but they can't reach the settlement before the Council investigators arrive. And revealing our military capabilities now would compromise everything we've built, Imani concluded grimly. I'm open to alternatives, the Admiral said. Imani closed her eyes, calculations running through her mind. The quantum relay prototype at Proxima Base. It's not certified for living organic matter, but the theoretical framework is sound. You're talking about experimental teleportation technology. The risk is lower than certain death, Imani cut in. I designed the system. I'll take responsibility for the attempt. 26 hours later, Imani stood in the Proxima facility alongside the most brilliant minds from 5 different species, making final adjustments to equipment never meant for this purpose. The massive power requirements had necessitated rerouting energy from the entire settlement, leaving them operating on emergency systems only. Targeting lock established with Arcturus Outpost, announced her Lithian colleague, silicon-based appendages moving with incredible precision across control surfaces. Council vessel will arrive in approximately 42 minutes. Begin evacuation sequence, Imani ordered. Children and caregivers first. The quantum portal hummed to life, creating a shimmering gateway between points in space that should have been impossible according to Council science. Through the monitoring feed, they watched as the first group of evacuees, human and alien children clutching prized possessions, were ushered toward the energetic aberration. A Krev teacher, recognizable by her distinctive academic markings, hesitated at the threshold, multiple limbs protectively encircling several small humans. It will work, Imani whispered, though no one could hear her across the vast distance. Trust what we built together. As the first evacuees stepped through the portal, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Security feeds showed Council ships arriving far ahead of schedule. They must have detected our power spike, someone shouted. On the monitors, chaos erupted at the Arcturus outpost as evacuation procedures accelerated. The Council vessels deployed containment drones, sterilization protocols initiating without even an attempt at communication. They're not even pretending to investigate, Imani realized with horror. This is an extermination mission. What followed would later be recorded as humanity's first direct military engagement with Council forces, not a planned strategic operation, but a desperate defense of children, triggered when a Council sterilization drone targeted the evacuation portal. From concealed defensive positions, human-designed combat systems revealed capabilities the standardized Council military had never encountered. Adaptive shielding that absorbed energy weapons, electronic warfare that turned automated systems against their masters, and targeting precision that disabled rather than destroyed. The Council commander, faced with unexpected resistance, made the critical error of broadcasting a fleet-wide order. Contamination protocols override all other directives. No cross-species integration can be permitted to survive. Lieutenant Maya Winters, monitoring communications from her intelligence post light years away, ensured this transmission reached every settlement in the Crossroads network, along with visual feeds of Council forces firing upon evacuating children. The Shadow network had remained hidden for a decade through cautious restraint. Now, as they watched the attempted slaughter of their youngest and most vulnerable, that restraint finally shattered. The agricultural world of Keldar Prime rotated lazily beneath the Prometheus, its once vibrant fields now visible as necrotic patches even from orbit. Captain Devi Sharma watched through the main viewport as her vessel maintained position alongside 2 other unmarked human ships. The planet's condition had deteriorated far faster than initial reports suggested. Latest atmospheric analysis confirms it, her science officer reported. The Council mining operation released ferric sulfide compounds into the upper atmosphere. They've poisoned a garden world. And abandoned it, Devi added quietly. The Kaldarians, six-limbed beings with photosynthetic skin patterns, had provided food for 12 council systems for centuries. Their request for emergency assistance had been met with a clinical response. Resource allocation priorities do not permit intervention. Productivity losses are within acceptable parameters. What the council meant was simple. The Kaldarians themselves were expendable. First transport is loaded and ready for atmospheric entry, announced her operations chief. Medical team reports gene-tailored crops and treatment protocols are prepared for immediate deployment. Remember, we're a non-affiliated humanitarian mission, Devi reminded her crew. No weapons visible, no military protocols observable. The Prometheus had been constructed specifically for these operations, appearing as a civilian vessel while harboring significant defensive capabilities beneath its unremarkable exterior. Today's mission was the network's most ambitious yet, not a covert supply run to a single settlement, but a planet-wide relief operation impossible to conceal. Captain, her communications officer interrupted. Multiple council vessels have just emerged from hyperspace. Configuration matches peacekeeping force. Devi's jaw tightened. That was faster than anticipated. Hold position and maintain humanitarian mission profile. The council's response had arrived with suspicious speed, almost as if they had been waiting nearby. The lead vessel, nearly 4 times the size of the Prometheus, established immediate communication. Unidentified vessels. Came the translated demand. This is Enforcement Commander Vex Thrall of the Galactic Council. You are in violation of quarantine directives. Prepare for immediate inspection and cargo confiscation. Devi opened a channel. Commander, we're delivering critical medical supplies to a population facing extinction. Our cargo includes genetically engineered crops designed to detoxify their soil and medical treatments for those already affected. Unauthorized biological materials are prohibited, the commander replied without hesitation. Prepare for boarding or face immediate neutralization. On her tactical display, Devi watched council ships moving to surround the medical transports already descending toward the planet's surface. Sir, her tactical officer whispered, they're targeting the hospital zones. The decision crystallized with terrible clarity. Decades of careful hiding, of building their shadow network while avoiding direct confrontation, all balanced against thousands of innocent lives in the crosshairs of council weapons. Deploy defensive measures, Devi ordered, her voice steady despite the historic significance of the command. Protect those hospitals at all costs. The battle above Keldar Prime shattered the Council's illusion of unchallenged dominance when the Prometheus engaged its phase shift technology, allowing energy weapons to pass harmlessly through its hull. The Council commander's incredulous reaction transmitted across all channels. Impossible. Human vessels executed maneuvers that defied the Council's combat algorithms, using Keldarian atmospheric conditions to mask their signatures and appear in unexpected vectors. Electronic countermeasures turned the Council's own targeting systems against each other, causing confusion as friendly fire warnings erupted across their fleet. The Council commander, confronted with tactics outside his experience, escalated to full offensive protocols, revealing the brutality that lurked beneath the Council's facade of benevolent governance. When his forces targeted civilian evacuation centers, Lieutenant Winter's intelligence team executed their most audacious hack yet. Throughout Council space, on thousands of worlds, communication systems suddenly broadcast unfiltered footage of Council ships firing upon medical facilities. The carefully maintained narrative of the Council, as protectors crumbled as citizens watched peacekeeping vessels systematically targeting hospitals filled with a species whose only crime had been growing food for Council worlds. In the Council chambers light years away, the emergency session descended into unprecedented disorder. Junior representatives from dozens of species demanded explanations their superiors couldn't provide. The carefully choreographed proceedings fractured as real-time footage continued streaming directly into the sacred chamber itself. Into this chaos stepped a figure most believed was trapped on quarantined Earth. Ambassador Elena Reyes. Her appearance dramatically changed by the years, but her voice unmistakable as she addressed the stunned assembly. For 2 decades, you've told your citizens that humanity was quarantined to protect galactic civilization from our violent, unpredictable nature, she announced, protected by a contingent of counselors who had secretly allied with the human resistance. Today, the galaxy witnesses which civilization truly requires restraint. The transmission from Keldar Prime continued playing on the chamber's massive displays. Council weapons firing upon evacuation transports, while human vessels maneuvered to protect them, absorbing damage rather than returning fire at full capacity. We could have built weapons, Elena continued as the evidence unfolded behind her. Instead, we built connections. We could have planned vengeance. Instead, we harvested crops engineered to heal poisoned worlds. Even now, with your ships firing upon children, our vessels prioritize protection over retaliation. High Counselor Thaxmore rose to demand her removal, but his authority wavered as representatives from 17 species stood in solidarity with Ambassador Reyes. The foundation of the Council's power, the illusion of unanimous consent, had finally fractured beyond repair. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, designed to embody perfect harmony through sacred geometries, had devolved into unprecedented chaos. Species who had silently endured millennia of second-class status now openly defy protocols that had governed proceedings since before Earth's dinosaurs evolved. High Counselor Thaxmore's crystalline form pulsed with chromatic patterns indicating extreme agitation as he attempted to reassert control. The chamber's acoustic architecture, once designed to carry his voice with perfect clarity, now amplified a cacophony of dissent. Order, he demanded, energy tendrils lashing from his upper appendages. I invoke Emergency Protocol Sigma-9. The invocation should have automatically activated suppression fields around dissident representatives. When nothing happened, confusion rippled through the council elite. Junior Counselor Laxvia stepped forward, her slender Tolari form seeming almost fragile next to Thaxmore's imposing presence. The chamber quieted as she raised a data crystal containing evidence too significant to ignore. The emergency systems are not malfunctioning, she announced, her voice carrying without technological assistance. They have been selectively deactivated by order of the Tolari High Command. Gasps echoed throughout the chamber. The Tolari were founding members whose ancient fleet still comprised a third of Council defenses. Impossible, Thaxmore hissed. The Tolari have stood with the Council since its inception. We stood with a Council dedicated to harmony and progress, Laxvia countered, not one that poisons agricultural worlds and fires upon hospitals. She activated the data crystal, projecting a multi-dimensional display visible to all species regardless of sensory apparatus. The evidence unfolded in irrefutable detail. Centuries of technological suppression, manipulated development trajectories, genetic modifications performed on allied species without consent, all meticulously documented from the Council's own classified archives. For 8,000 years, Laxvia continued, the founding species have maintained dominance by systematically restricting technological advancement among newer members. Innovation is not shared, it is controlled. Ambassador Reyes moved to stand beside her, the human and Tolari, presenting a unified front that would have been unimaginable years earlier. The humans didn't just build colonies and ships, Laxvia declared. They built something you systematically stripped from the galaxy. Hope. They approached other species as equals, sharing innovations freely rather than hoarding them. Thaxmore's form shimmered with rage. This is sedition. Security forces detain the human and her collaborators. The Council's elite guard units moved forward, then stopped as their commanders received simultaneous communications. Throughout the chamber, security personnel found themselves facing an impossible choice as evidence of the Council's manipulations flowed directly to their neural interfaces. Your guards are receiving unfiltered access to Council archives, Reyes explained calmly. including details of how their own species have been genetically modified to ensure compliance. Facts more abandon diplomacy. Activate emergency termination protocols. Sterilize this chamber. The ancient defense systems embedded within the Council citadel hummed to life, then abruptly powered down. On Faxmore's private channel, a voice he recognized as Dr. James Chen's spoke with almost apologetic politeness. "I'm afraid we've been inside your systems for quite some time, Counselor. Did you really believe you could isolate an entire planet of hackers without consequences?" Aboard the Council flagship Immutable Order, Admiral Xentor faced a mutiny unlike any in Council history. The sleek predatory features of his species, evolved for perfect pack cohesion, contorted in confusion as his executive officer presented evidence that their legendary loyalty had been artificially engineered. "Our species was genetically modified during early contact," Commander Ren Shot explained, displaying genetic markers identical across all their kind. "These sequences don't exist in our pre-Council ancestors. They engineered compliance into our genome." Around them, the bridge crew, representing 17 different species, watched their commanders with new understanding. The revelation spread from ship to ship across the Council fleet, disrupting the perfect hierarchy that had defined their civilization. "The Alliance vessels at Keldar Prime could have destroyed our ships," Renshaw continued. "Instead, they disabled weapons systems while protecting evacuation transports. They chose preservation over victory." Admiral Xentor studied the tactical displays showing Council authority collapsing across multiple sectors simultaneously. The strategic brilliance of the human operation was undeniable. Sleeper agents activated precisely as the Council's hypocrisy was exposed, creating maximum psychological impact. "They've been planning this for decades," he realized aloud. "Not conquest, but liberation." Throughout Council space, Dr. Chen's network of human operatives executed the final phase of Operation Breakaway. Hidden data packets activated in communication relays. Suppressed technologies suddenly became accessible in public databases. Historic archives restored species erased from official records. As the Council's webs of control unwound, the shadow empire humanity had built emerged from darkness, not as conquerors, but as architects of a new order based on cooperation rather than subjugation. The Council war fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, over 200 vessels arranged in the sacred geometric pattern that had broken planetary defenses for millennia. At their center, the dreadnought Eternal Dominion dwarfed its escorts, its silhouette blotting out the light of Proxima Centauri. Fleet Commander Zexcare, one of the few remaining officers loyal to High Counselor Faxmore, surveyed the human colony world through sensory feeds. Where he expected to find vulnerable settlements, he instead discovered a defensive system unlike any encountered in Council records. "Orbital analysis complete," his tactical officer reported. "Detecting energy signatures from multiple species. Configurations suggest cooperative design methodology." "Impossible," Zexcar dismissed. "The discarded lack cohesion by definition. Deploy according to standard protocols." The Council fleet advanced with algorithmic precision, weapons charging as they prepared to execute containment procedures that would render Proxima Centauri uninhabitable. Their targeting systems locked onto population centers, prioritizing structures identified as research facilities. No one aboard noticed when microscopic organisms began adhering to their hulls, bioengineered Vextal polyps, seeded throughout the system months earlier, awaiting activation. Aboard the Unity, Admiral Okafor watched the Council fleet's approach from a command center that integrated technologies from 27 different species. Around her, a crew that would have been impossible under Council segregation worked with synchronized purpose, human intuition complemented by Krev mathematical precision. Vextal collective awareness harmonizing with Lithian analytical processing. "They're deploying exactly as predicted," reported her tactical officer. "Standard Council doctrine, third variation." Okafor nodded. "They're still running the combat algorithms they've used for 2,000 years. Activate countermeasures," Phase 1. Throughout the Proxima system, carefully positioned defense platforms awakened. Unlike conventional military assets, these had been disguised as research stations, mining outposts, and environmental monitors. Another layer in humanity's strategy of misdirection. Council fleet entering optimal engagement range, announced the communications officer. All Allied vessels reporting ready. Admiral Okafor took a moment to study the tactical display. The coming confrontation would determine whether decades of preparation had been sufficient against a civilization thousands of years more advanced. All units, execute Operation Watershed. Fleet Commander Zexker's certainty faltered as his pristine formation began encountering inexplicable difficulties. Navigational systems reported spatial anomalies where none should exist. Targeting computers recalibrated repeatedly, unable to maintain locks on structures that seemed to phase between different dimensional states. Energy fluctuations throughout the fleet, reported his engineering officer with growing alarm. Hull integrity compromised on 17 vessels, corrective measures ineffective. The microscopic Vextol organisms had begun their work, secreting compounds that altered the molecular structure of Council hull materials. Simultaneously, Krev-designed hyperspace disruptors activated, preventing reinforcements from arriving and trapping the fleet in normal space. As confusion spread through Council ranks, the Alliance revealed its true capabilities. Vessels of human design but incorporating technologies from a dozen species emerged from hiding positions throughout the system, engaging with tactics the Council's battle computers couldn't predict. They're not following any recognized combat doctrine, Zexker realized with growing horror. Each vessel operates independently while maintaining coordinated strategy. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as Alliance weapons targeted its propulsion systems with surgical precision. On secondary vessels, non-essential systems failed as human-designed electronic warfare suites executed algorithms specifically designed to exploit Council operating protocols. How are they communicating? Zexkar demanded as Alliance vessels executed complex maneuvers requiring split-second coordination. There's no transmission delay. His question was answered as Dr. Okello's quantum communication network demonstrated its full capability. Alliance vessels coordinated instantaneously across vast distances, an advantage the Council had believed technologically impossible. The battle's turning point came not in the Proxima system, but simultaneously across 57 worlds as precisely coordinated uprisings erupted throughout Council space. Security forces found themselves facing populations armed with previously suppressed technologies and unified by real-time communication. Aboard the Unity, Lieutenant Winters monitored this galaxy-wide coordination effort. Rebellions confirmed on all primary targets. Council response capabilities overwhelmed as predicted. Admiral Okafor nodded gravely. And the losses? Within acceptable parameters, Winters answered, though her expression revealed the human cost behind the clinical assessment. The diversionary actions are drawing Council forces away from population centers. Even as the battle raged, a small diplomatic vessel slipped through the chaos, carrying Ambassador Reyes and Councillor Laxvia toward the Council citadel. Their mission represented humanity's final gambit, not military victory, but fundamental transformation of the galactic order. As Council ships began surrendering or declaring neutrality, Admiral Okafor issued her most critical order. All units prioritize minimizing casualties on both sides. We're not fighting for vengeance. We're fighting for what comes after. Europa Station hung in Jupiter's orbit like a crystal tear, its transparent dome allowing delegates to gaze upon Earth in the distance, while the gas giant's turbulent atmosphere provided a dramatic backdrop. The symbolism was deliberate, humanity hosting peace talks at the edge of their home system, just beyond where Council quarantine ships had once maintained their blockade. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, environmental accommodations for hundreds of species created a tapestry of sight, sound, and sensation. Atmosphere barriers separated methane breathers from oxygen dependence. Gravity plates adjusted locally for beings from high or low G worlds. Translation systems handled over 800 language forms simultaneously. Dr. Imani Okello made final adjustments to her formal attire. Traditional Nigerian patterns interwoven with symbolic elements from allied species. As Earth's chief scientific representative, she would present the technological framework that could either unify or further divide the galaxy. "Nervous?" asked Dr. Chen, his once black hair now completely white, the lines on his face telling the story of 20 years of clandestine resistance. "Terrified," she admitted. "We're asking civilizations with millennia of history to embrace fundamental change. They're here because the alternative failed them," he reminded her gently. "That's a powerful motivation." The chamber quieted as Ambassador Rice took the central podium. The years had transformed her from the stunned diplomat who had faced rejection 2 decades earlier into a figure of quiet authority. "Distinguished representatives," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. 20 years ago, humanity stood before the Galactic Council seeking friendship and was instead met with isolation. Today, we gather not to create a new empire, but to establish something unprecedented, a galactic community based on equality rather than dominance. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as translation systems conveyed her words into hundreds of languages, biochemical signals, and sensory impressions. "The accord before you dissolves the hierarchical structure that defined the Council for 8 millennia, she continued. "No longer will species be classified by technological achievement or resource control. Each will have equal standing regardless of their development stage or biological nature." Representatives from former Council worlds shifted uncomfortably. An imposing Dorvac rose to speak, armor plates shifting as it moved. "Your proposal would grant the same authority to primitive worlds as to those who have mastered interstellar travel," it objected. "How can species barely beyond atmospheric flight contribute meaningfully to galactic governance?" Before Rice could respond, a representative of the insectoid Krev approached the central floor. "My species was classified as resource inefficient, despite our mathematical contributions. The Vextal were discarded when their biological engineering was deemed obsolete. Humanity was quarantined for its potential to disrupt stability." The Krev's antennae vibrated with emotion. Yet together, these 3 lesser species created quantum communication technology that the Council declared impossible. "Perhaps capability cannot be measured by your traditional metrics." Silence followed this observation until a former Council security commander spoke. "And what prevents this new alliance from becoming another empire with different masters?" "Power concentrates naturally." Ambassador Rice gestured to Dr. Okello, who approached the center with quiet confidence. Above the assembly, a holographic display activated, showing a revolutionary technological concept. "We call it the confluence drive," Imani explained, highlighting energy patterns that shifted and merged in complex harmony. By combining the unique scientific approaches of multiple species, human intuition, Krev mathematics, Vextal biological engineering, Lithian quantum manipulation, we've developed a method to harness energy directly from spacetime itself. The implications dawned gradually across the assembly. An end to resource scarcity that had driven conflict for millennia. "This technology belongs to no single species," Imani continued. "It exists only through our combined knowledge and can only function through continued cooperation. We propose establishing open scientific exchanges throughout the galaxy, where all advancements are shared rather than hoarded." As the negotiations progressed over weeks, the former High Counselor Thax Moore was brought to witness the proceedings. His crystalline form had dimmed. Power structures he had maintained for centuries now collapsed around him. "Our models predicted your species would eventually challenge our authority," he told Ambassador Reyes during a private moment. "But they never anticipated you would replace dominance with cooperation. That was your fundamental error," she replied without malice. "You saw our adaptability as a threat rather than a gift." The signing ceremony on the final day united over 400 species in the newly christened Galactic Senate. The massive station that would serve as its headquarters was already under construction at the former quarantine boundary, built in the shape of a double helix to symbolize strength through diversity. As Dr. Imani Okello took the podium as Earth's first Senate representative, she gazed across the extraordinary assembly. Beings that crawled, floated, phased between states of matter, communicated through light or chemical signals or gravitational waves. For centuries, humanity wondered if we were alone in the universe, she began. When we learned we weren't, our first instinct wasn't fear, but hope. Hope for connection, for friendship, for the chance to be part of something greater than ourselves. She gestured to the stars visible through the station's transparent dome. The old council saw diversity as chaos requiring control. We see it as the greatest creative force in existence. Every species brings unique perspectives, abilities, and dreams. Together, we'll build a civilization greater than any could achieve alone. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Okafor stood beside Captain Sharma, watching the historic moment unfold. Was it worth it? Sharma asked quietly. All the sacrifice, the years of hiding, the lives lost. Okafor's gaze moved across the chamber where human children played alongside the offspring of a dozen different species, the first generation to grow up in a truly united galaxy. They banned humanity from their empire, she replied with quiet certainty. So we built something better. Not an empire of conquest, but a community of equals. I'd say that's worth everything.